We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
I want to talk about news, don't want the drama. From no pretentious media Madonna. I found me a great ganja mama. Cannabis and coffee with Tamarijuana.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Cannabis and Coffee. It's a beautiful day in the East Kootenay. It's a brisk minus 27. It's a bit chilly this morning, but sun's shining, so that's always a good thing when you wake up and the sun's at least shining and you get on with your day. This morning I have a very special guest. I've known Mr. Larsen probably for going on 13 years now, and he's been very active in our community for decades. It's hard to introduce him because there's so many things that you can say. So I'm just not going to bother. I'm just going to let him start talking because there's so much to go over this morning. So good morning, Dana. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me. It's caught me in a cough now. I'm just about that's what I get for having a little toke right before you have me on. But hey, it's good for being on the show. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. That's a good way to start the show, with a good cough, because then we know that, we're all getting medicated and getting on with our days and trying to get going, right? So normally I usually ask who, what, where questions. So I'm going to ask you who you are and how you got involved in the drug war, because I can't just say cannabis with you, because your iron is in so many fires. So how did you get involved in the drug war?
Well, this is going back a while, but when I started smoking cannabis in like grade 12 in high school, and started learning about the war on drugs and what a terrible, terrible policy it is and how harmful it is. And kind of started with cannabis, but moved on to understanding it's more than just cannabis. It's really a bigger issue. And in university, I met some like-minded people at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver and started a club called the League for Ethical Action on Drugs. And I guess that was kind of the beginning of my activism. We would have events on campus and bring on speakers, and I would write letters to members of parliament about the drug war and keep their answers in a binder that I had. And for me at the time, there wasn't a lot of activism, in the late 80s. There wasn't a lot of voices pushing against the war on drug users. And so it seemed to me like an important issue, and one where I could make a change and hopefully make a difference. And now it's, 30 years plus later. And I think we have made a difference, although it's a very difficult policy to change, that this war on drugs is very entrenched in our society, and it's probably going to take more than a lifetime to really undo this, something that's been around for over a century now. But that's kind of how I got started. And I became more of an activist, met Mark Emery, and got involved in the Hemp BC and cannabis culture and BC Marijuana Party and other things like that. And it's really been a wonderful journey in many ways. And I think we have made some real positive changes, but there's still so much to do to really end this terrible war that's gone on for so many generations, and it's just brought misery and harm to so many.
Absolutely. I totally agree. You really got involved in politics too. Like, you ran for the leadership of the NDP party in British Columbia a few years ago. And even like we went to the Liberal Convention in 2014 together, and we made policy change there, which got us rolling with legalization into cannabis. So there's so many policies that have been changed that, you've had a hand in helping. And again, with the Vancouver 420 events and all the events and all the awareness. Now, another question I'd like to ask you too is, because of harm reduction, you now run it's get your drugs tested. Now, that's really important for small communities. Can we explain to people what that entails?
Yeah, sure. So we had our cannabis dispensary on East Hastings for over 10 years. It was the third dispensary in the city. And I think we were quite influential in encouraging others to open their own cannabis dispensaries and build this cannabis dispensary movement across Canada. But after 10 years, we had a battle with the city and other dispensaries as well. And they forced us to close down our location. We would have been in contempt of court. Bad things would have happened. So we made a decision to strategically retreat or shut that down. But we didn't close the location. We ended up turning it into the Get Your Drugs Tested Center. And we bought this machine. It's called an FTIR. It stands for Fourier Transform Infrared. Basically, it's about the size of a bread box. You put a tiny little sample of a drug or actually any substance. So these machines were originally developed for like mineral samples and chemical testing and things like that. But you put a little bit of your drug on the machine and you shines a laser at it and it analyzes the light spectrum that comes out and tells you what's in it. And we've been testing people's drugs for free for about a year and a half now. We started this in June of 2019, and we actually just hit a milestone of 10,000 drug samples that we've tested now. So anybody can come by our location. They used to be able to come inside. Now they got to stand outside because of COVID, but they come by. They bring us a little sample. You wait 5 or 10 minutes. We'll tell you what's in the substance, if it's what you expected it to be or not. And sometimes it's exactly what they thought it was going to be. And a lot of times it's not that at all, or it's contaminated with fentanyl or benzodiazepines, or they think it's one thing and it's really something else. And I think this is so crucial and important. I mean, to me, in a reasonable world, people would be able to get you wouldn't need to get your drugs tested because they'd be tested before you buy them, like every other consumer product out there. Right. You would know what's in it because you'd read the label and you'd be able to trust that label is accurate in a properly regulated world. But failing that, getting your drugs analyzed after you buy them or before you take them is very important. And I think we've saved people from overdoses in many, many cases over those years, or from poisonings, perhaps is a better word. You know, it's not really an overdose if it wasn't the drug you were seeking at all in the first place. It's more of a poisoning. You know, you buy some ecstasy or some cocaine for your evening, and it turns out it's got fentanyl in it. That can be deadly.
Yeah.
So I'm really proud about that. And, you know, the BC government and in a few other provinces, there is some limited drug testing done by the government for people, but it's really hard, even here in BC, where our government says stop stigmatizing drug users and has all these great things, and they offer drug testing too. We're not the only ones that do it, but they offer it. They'll be like 2 days a week for 3 hours a day, only at the injection site. And so if you're about to inject your drugs, that's better than nothing. But for a lot of people, going to an injection site, it's kind of a scary place if you're not used to it. And if you want to get your MDMA tested and you're not an injection drug user, having to go down to Insight or something is a huge barrier to people. Right. And so that's why we do like 2/3 of all the tests in British Columbia, and over half of all the tests in Canada are being done by us. And, you know, we don't get any government funding for this. We pay for it ourselves from the money from our unlicensed cannabis dispensary. We have one of those left in the city after losing one, and we use that. So I'm really proud about this. I didn't quite realize how big it was going to get. You know, I had this idea we should buy one of these machines. It's about $45,000, and if we save up, we can afford one. And now we have 2 of them, and we're super busy. We're operating 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, and like I said, 10,000 drug samples we've hit. And that we actually have now the largest archive of drug analysis results anywhere in the world. So anybody can go to our website at getyourdrugstested.com, and they can look at our results, and not only do we offer it in person, but we offer it by mail. So of those 10,000, about 1,500 were samples mailed to us from somewhere across the country. It's only got to be the tiniest little bit, so you just got to take a little scraping off of your pill or a little bit of the powder or whatever it is, and when we get it, we'll analyze it the same day and email you the results, you know, as fast as we can, right? And
that's amazing.
So we've got, since you can go to your city, and type in your city, and you can see all the results from Calgary or all the results from Hamilton or whatever, and you can, I've got a pill with the Mickey Mouse symbol on it, and it's from this and this, and maybe you can find that in our database and see if it's been tested or not, and find out what you're taking, right? So that searchable database, I think, is important because you can find out what you've got sometimes without having to send a sample in, and seeing what other people have tested. And so it's an important service, and one that I really wish the government was funding properly, so individual citizens like me don't have to do it. But I'm also terribly proud of the work we've done, and so the service we offer, I think it's really turned out to really well.
I agree, because we have anchors here in town, and at one point in time I'd asked them, do you guys have drug testing and stuff? And they told me to reach out to you, and I just kind of started snickering. I thought, well, okay, I can do that. Like, it's not that I wanted to test it. I had friends that were wanting to know some information. We thought we could just send them down to anchors here. Now, apparently they are doing some drug testing here. I don't know if they send it to you or exactly what the protocol is, but we get alerts. And there's always
anchors. I think is anchors. If I understand correctly, they were tied in with the Shambhala Music Festival.
Right.
And that festival, they privately also, with the proceeds from Shambhala, they bought the FTIR, and they also use, like, you can use reagents as well, chemical tests where you put a little drop on stuff and see if the color changes or not. And those are good, and they're cheaper to work with in the beginning because you don't need to pay so much. But it's not quite as accurate as the full-on machine. But yeah, I think that the anchors was we got the machine through Shambhala. They do testing as well, but I don't think it's 7 days a week, 8 hours a day that you can drop by and bring your samples. They probably don't have the money for that, so it's more limited in how often they do it. But
yeah, I'm not sure.
The more of this, the better. But it is a problem that this isn't properly available, and it really saves a lot of money because although there is an investment in the machine, once you've got the machine, the actual test, there's no additional cost other than paying the person to push the buttons and look at it and stuff, right? So,
right.
It's for a couple of $1 million, they could have drug testing all across British Columbia or even all across Canada, and it would be a huge lifesaver and probably save money because aside from the physical costs, people dying from overdoses, there's also a lot of cost involved, sending paramedics, it all adds up to being several $1,000s every time someone overdoses to go and rescue them. And so avoiding that, not only is it life-saving, but it's financially saving as well. These machines are a good investment in public health and in the public purse as well.
And are you finding that there is no real drugs actually in most of this stuff? Are you finding it's mostly fentanyl, benzos? Like, what are you finding?
Well, there's a lot of samples that get brought in that are exactly what they expect. We get samples that are pure cocaine or pure MDMA. We get heroin, but there's a lot of contamination and a lot of mislabeling of stuff, right? So, of the heroin samples that have been brought in, like we asked them, what do you think it is when you bought it? What did they tell you it was? And we find, for instance, that about half the samples that are brought in where the person says, I was told this is heroin, it's actually fentanyl. So that's not really, that's like, it's still going to have it's going to have the effect they're looking for, but fentanyl is much stronger. They're trying to buy a wheat beer and getting pure liquor instead. Like it's stronger. It'll have the same general effect, but the difference between the amount you need to have the effect you want and the amount that will kill you is very small. And so it's very difficult to titrate your dose properly. But we also find fentanyl in things like cocaine and heroin. Now, it's only been in about 1% of the samples people have brought in. So cocaine is often cut with other things. Like usually when people bring in cocaine, there's cocaine in it. But often sometimes it's pure cocaine, but usually it's partly cocaine and partly mannitol, like a sugar or other substances. Sometimes they're things that sort of have the same look as cocaine, but are different. Sometimes they're things that have a numbing effect, so like benzocaine or other chemicals. So if you put some on your tongue to test it or rub it on your gums, it'll make them numb, but it's not the same thing. And usually it's something more harmful. Even fentanyl, people don't get what they want. You go try to buy fentanyl, and you often end up with benzodiazepines. And that's really a problem because an overdose on those, if you give somebody Narcan and they've overdosed on benzos, the Narcan is not really going to help them. It's a different chemical combination. And so, or you get mixes where it's partly fentanyl and partly benzos. And so those kind of things are very hard to recover from. Of course, as a user, if you don't know what you're taking, you're going to end up having a bad experience. And so, fentanyl is in a lot of things. Like maybe it's only in 1% of cocaine and MDMA samples, but 1% is a lot. If 1% of the alcohol or the cannabis had some deadly drug in it, that would be huge. That would be killing a lot of people. And so it's the same problem with these other substances. So we find cuts sometimes we find, often we find there's fentanyl or benzos in things, and it's been increasing. And I can look back now at the year and a half and analyze, well, in our first 500 samples of cocaine, this many had fentanyl in it. And in our second 500, there was this many. And in the third 500, there's this many. And we see all these numbers going up. So the amount, and we've only been around for a year and a half. This has been going on for decades, right? But we can definitely see a trend of increased contamination in the drug supply. In the year and a half we've been doing it, there's more samples that have stuff in that shouldn't be there. And COVID isn't helping either. But you can't really just blame COVID entirely, because this has been something that's been going on for decades. And, we were talking about how I got started in the 90s, in the late 80s and early 90s. And at that time in British Columbia, we had an overdose crisis. There was about one death a day. And this was considered a huge public health crisis, as it is. And they had the chief coroner of British Columbia go around the province and have public hearings and talk to hundreds of people and health experts and police and nurses and doctors and users and all these different things. And he recommended the same things we're hearing now. We got to decriminalize drug users. We got to stop stigmatizing people. We got to have a safe supply. Prohibition is the root problem. And all of his recommendations just got ignored. And even though they spend a lot of money on these things, they never follow the advice that they get in the end. And nowadays, if we got overdose deaths down to one death a day, which was a major crisis in the 90s, now, because it's so much worse, that'd be a huge public health success. They'd be like, oh, we did it. Got them down to one a day. Problem solved. Because it's gotten now, it's like 4 or 5 a day. So that will be a huge victory getting back to this level. So this has been going on a very long time, and it's really, it's caused by politicians and by a system that just insists that drug use is bad and morally wrong, and that the way to punish drug users is to make sure they don't have a safe supply and that they have to risk their life every time, because that's the only way to teach them that it's bad. And it's, it makes as much sense as banning condoms to try to prevent teen pregnancy and STDs. It's only going to make things worse, right? Having being able to do things safely, and drug use ultimately is a natural thing. The vast majority of human beings on Earth use a drug of some kind, and the ones we've banned has very little to do with safety or logic, and a lot to do with racism and cultural inertia and the things that were happening 100 years ago that shouldn't really be relevant anymore, And we were talking before the show, and I mentioned how, what would happen if we banned caffeine in coffee tomorrow? Right. And this is a thing that came close to being banned historically several times, and coffee was considered a dangerous political substance. People would gather in coffee shops and talk politics and complain about the king, and this was considered a big problem. And in the same way that cannabis is often seen as a countercultural thing, people smoke cannabis and then they don't want to go to war, they want to stop the government and change things. And 85% of the population uses caffeine in some form. If we banned coffee and banned it, we would see an increase in snorting caffeine, an increase in injecting caffeine. We'd see people having caffeine with fentanyl in it, and having people dying of caffeine overdoses that are really like caffeine and fentanyl mixed together. We'd be spraying poisons over coffee plantations in South America, and we'd see caffeine cartels and coffee cartels forming, and we would see it in real time, and this happening. And this is what we've done over the past century to these other substances. And then they'd say, oh, well, when I was a kid, the coffee wasn't very strong, but now it's like too strong and it's pure caffeine, and we can't allow that anymore, and maybe I tried coffee back in college, but, it wasn't for me. And we would see all this kind of hypocrisy happening that we're seeing now, right? And exactly. It sounds hilarious, but it's like the same thing we've seen with other substances. And maybe there's a parallel world. People are drinking coca tea and putting down the caffeine injectors and the caffeine snorters for being disruptive while they sip on their coca leaf tea, something that I sell at my cafe.
Right. Well, that's exactly true, because you've opened the Coca Leaf Cafe too in Vancouver, and that's so amazing. Like, how is that going?
So this is something I've been working on for a few years, really, to get it together. And it's a very complicated project. You know, when you open a cannabis dispensary in British Columbia, there's marijuana everywhere. So getting quality cannabis to sell to people and make available, it's more a matter of screening out the stuff that's not medical grade and providing a good selection. But with something like coca leaf, no one's growing coca leaf in Canada. You've got to bring that into the country. You've got to import and smuggle coca leaf in. So I've been working on that for quite a few years and have a fairly decent supply line of coca leaf now, although COVID has made everything challenging. And so last year in October, I finally opened a place called the Coca Leaf Cafe. And that's in Vancouver, just a few blocks away from where I Get Your Drugs Tested Center on East Hastings. And we're now the only place in the Northern Hemisphere where anybody can walk in and order a cup of coca tea or buy some coca tea leaf to bring home and make coca tea at home, or coca chew packs as well. And, you know, coca leaf has been used for thousands of years across South America for chewing and drinking tea. Mostly they would chew it, and it's got alkaloids in it. The most famous one is cocaine, but there's a lot of alkaloids in there, and together they have quite a wonderful effect when you chew it or when you drink coca tea. And it increases your oxygen flow in your body, and so they use it often for altitude sickness in those areas. People living in very high parts of the Andes Mountains, like in Bolivia, La Paz, where it's so high altitude that the air is very thin. And if you visit there, which I've done, you often feel like you're drowning, or you have to start gasping because you're not getting enough oxygen, and the air is so thin, and it feels quite, you get headaches and you feel bad, and you drink some coca tea or chew some coca leaf, and it allows your body to adapt to that lower oxygen, and you feel good. And you know, South American people will talk about how, you know, they've used coca leaf for thousands of years, never had any problems with it. Europeans come along, make this stuff cocaine out of their leaf, which they don't use typically, and it's not part of their culture, and then blame them for this harmful drug, and then go to war with their coca growers, while at the same time pushing up the price of coca leaf and cocaine to the point where it's virtually irresistible for a poor farmer to not grow any, since it becomes so valuable to a people and a culture that doesn't really have a lot of money, that coca growing for cocaine becomes a huge part of their economy and becomes a big sort of a challenge for their society, in a way that really is not anything to do with them. And I got all these videos, and I've met a lot of coca growers and people there, and they're like, you know, we're not into cocaine. That's not our thing. That's your thing that Westerners brought here and are now punishing us for their invention and their use of this thing, that we don't need it that way.
Right.
And, so my mission, you know, I've always seen what we call the war on drugs as really being a war on plants. And I always talk about how, you know, cannabis flowers are wonderful plants, but so are opium poppies, and so are coca leaves, and so are psilocybin mushrooms, and so are peyote cacti. And that at their root, what we call dangerous drugs are for the most part plant medicines that have been used for thousands and thousands and thousands of years by people across the world, with many benefits and many social, cultural, religious, spiritual, medicinal purposes that are being prohibited for reasons that have nothing to do with health or public safety, and everything to do with colonialism, racism, profiteering, eliminating our connection with natural substances. And so for me, bringing back coca tea to people, and definitely some people are quite afraid, oh, is there cocaine in this? Am I going to get all freaked out? And I'm like, well, there is a little cocaine in there, but there's also a lot of other alkaloids. It's not just about that. In the same way that cannabis isn't just about THC, and although THC can be useful, for a lot of people, pure THC makes them feel uncomfortable and makes them too stimulated and makes them feel they don't like it. You want all the cannabinoids together. And in the same way with coca tea, having a cup of coca tea is very different than starting cocaine. And I'm not against taking cocaine in a pure form, and that should be legal and allowed. But, you know, the reality is, like we talked about coffee, and the people who use a lot of caffeine, they don't snort caffeine. There are people that do that. You know, you can go on Reddit, you can find forum people talking about snorting caffeine, and they enjoy it. You'll get a good buzz off it, right? But
oh, really?
the vast majority Yeah, but the vast majority of caffeine users, if you want a lot of caffeine, you just drink really strong espresso, or you buy a Monster energy drink, or you consume it in those forms because that's just easier and the preferred way, and what makes more sense. And I really think if people had access to coca tea and coca drinks in a reasonable world where this was normalized, that there'd be still some cocaine snorters out there, but it would be a minority of people. And there's research showing that cocaine users will switch to chewing coca leaf and drinking coca tea often, given the option. And so for me, it's about safer access.
Is it the same effect? Like, do you get the same effect from, say, having a
tea? It's
the
same effect, but more mild, right? When you're injecting a pure substance and snorting it or injecting it, you're getting a real strong rush. You're getting a huge amount in your body at once. And when you chew coca leaf, it's coming in much more slowly. When you drink tea, it comes on even slower, right? So like coffee too, it takes about half an hour or so from drinking a cup for it to fully be active through your body. When you chew the leaf, it comes in faster because it goes right into your bloodstream, and your cheek will get all numb as well, and you'll feel a tingling in your cheek, a kind of a psychological effect that you know it's there. But it's not really the same. I mean, it's similar, I guess, but it's just sort of that THC comparison. You know, taking pure THC is not really the effect most cannabis users are looking for, and that they prefer cannabis with a wider range of cannabinoids and a wider range of effect. When you drink, if you look at South America, the leaf that they chew is not the leaf that's highest in cocaine. So when they're growing coca leaf for cocaine production, they grow certain varieties that are the highest in cocaine they can get, and they grow them also in a different kind of way. They don't worry about what they spray on it or how they treat it because it's all going to be processed and changed anyways and turned into this white powder. So they don't really care. They just want the most possible yield. But when they grow for chewing, it's a very competitive market, right? You can buy chewable chewable coca leaf bags all across Bolivia and in large parts of Peru. And people want the leaf that tastes good. They want the sweeter leaf that's more preferable for chewing. And when you analyze it, the leaf they prefer to chew is not the strongest in cocaine. And we'll have a lot of other alkaloids and a lot of other things in there as well that provide a more balanced effect. And so just like if you ask cannabis users, they don't really, having a high THC level is one thing perhaps, but the way the plant smells and the way it tastes are often way more important to people, right? They judge by the terpenes. Right. You know, I don't really care about the tea. You want something that's got some potency to it, but ultimately that's not, if you show me some buds, my first thing is, can I smell them? Can I look at them? Rather than give me a scientific analysis, I want the one with the highest THC no matter what. That's not really the right way to
says. Yeah, don't care what the label says. I want to see it. Yeah.
But we have a lot of people who really are enjoying coca tea. I find it better than coffee. Coffee is hard on my stomach. Makes me jittery, makes me anxious, sometimes makes me cranky if I drink coffee at the wrong time. Coca tea, I find, is very stimulating, but also kind of soothing because, like I was saying, how it increases oxygen flow. It stimulates your mind, and if you chew coca or drink coca tea in the evening, you might have trouble sleeping, like with coffee, right? But it doesn't make you jittery. It doesn't make me cranky, and it's a relaxing effect on the muscles, so it's kind of soothing as well as stimulating, and it focuses your mind, and it can help you with creativity and with thinking better and having insights in that. Those are all benefits of coca leaf. So I've really enjoyed bringing it to people and getting it out there.
It sounds medicinal. Yeah, it sounds medicinal.
It is. It's a medicine plant. You know, coca leaf is a medicine plant, and now that I've been doing this place and reading all these books, and that I've learned a lot about the history of the coca leaf and about the medicinal and social uses and about how it was transformed during colonization.
It's been demonized the same as cannabis was, because at one point in time there was cocaine for medicinal use too. They used it for pain relief and such in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So it's been demonized the same as cannabis was, like through reefer madness. I don't know exact when prohibition of cocaine. You probably know. When was the exact time?
It kind of went in phases, right? So what happened is you have the Inca culture, pre-Spanish
You know what?
invasion
I'm
of
just
South
going to stop
America.
you. I'm going to stop you. We're going to take a quick break because this is going to be long, and I don't want to interrupt you again. So we're going to take a quick
No problem.
2-minute break and thank our sponsors, and then we'll come back and talk some more to Dana. You're listening to us live on paceradio.net.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Growing your own vegetables, flowers, or even medicinal plants can be a challenge without the right equipment and proper know-how. At BMA Hydroponics, not only are they your urban horticultural experts and suppliers, but their staff holds the customer's needs paramount to making a sale. Family-owned with decades of experience and knowledge, they offer free advice in person, by phone, or email. BMA Hydroponics wants to ensure you have the advice you need, which is why you'll find tips and tricks on different ways to grow, like wick, ebb and flow, drip, or aeroponic system, as well as other helpful links at bmahydroponics.com. If you can't find what you're looking for, just let them know, and they'll do everything they can to get what you're looking for. At BMA Hydroponics, each staff member also possesses a federal exemptee MMAR license, making their strong suit empathy, experience, and dedication to their customers. Because when you know how to grow, you'll have results that make you proud. BMA Hydroponics in Belleville, Ontario. Visit bmahydroponics.com.
CP operates a medicinal cannabis signing clinic. If you want to grow your own medicinal cannabis and are located anywhere in Canada, then I'd like to suggest that you give them a call. They can be reached at 1-613-967-9888. That's 1-613-967-9888. And grow on with CP.
Pace Radio is the people advocating cannabis education radio network.
A doctor's job is to relieve your pains. And when it comes to growing cannabis, the biggest pain is trimming. Let Dr. Buck Cannabis Trimming Solutions take the pain away. Whether you're a home grower or a commercial operation, we have the cure. From 4 plants to 400 plants, garden size doesn't matter. Dr. Buck Cannabis Trimming Solutions comes to you with years of experience and professional discreet service. It's simple. We trim your weed and we do a damn good job. Visit drbuckcts.com to book your trimming.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
At Legacy 420, we believe in being different.
Experience the difference of quality control.
Our labs provide tested formulations for all of our products.
Experience the difference in trust.
Our customers can trust that we are following up-to-date COVID precautions for their safety.
Experience the difference in accessibility.
We're open 7 days a week. Please visit our website, legacy420.com, or contact us for curbside pickup as well as nationwide mail order shipping.
Legacy 420 values overall wellness.
Come and experience the difference of Legacy 420.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
All right, and we're back with Dana, and I cut him off when we were talking prior to the break, and we'll get back to that. So we were talking a little bit about the whole, effects and stuff, and the difference in legality.
Yeah, the history of coca leaves and coca prohibition and everything.
Exactly. When do you know when cocaine, like when the whole prohibition was?
Well, it kind of went through in stages, right? So you had the Inca Empire, and they were pre-Spanish. And coca leaf was very important to their culture and their religion, and their priests would chew coca while doing ceremonies, and it was a very integral part of their society, used at every level. When the Spanish came, they treated coca like a devil-worshipping thing. It was part of indigenous culture, a culture they wanted to destroy and replace with Catholicism and their own culture. And so coca was prohibited. But when they were enslaving, there was a lot of murder and enslaving going on at this time, and they had silver mines that the Spanish ran in South America, and they would work the indigenous people there, and they found that they would work a lot harder and better when they supplied them with coca leaf. So it went from being something that was prohibited to something that they saw having economic benefit in, and so the Spanish really tried to monopolize coca leaf growing and selling it to indigenous people as a way of continuing to profiteer off their colonialization. This is before cocaine was discovered or isolated. Coca leaf didn't really make a big impact in Europe, because when they brought it back to Europe, by the time it arrived, it would have gone bad and it wouldn't be active anymore. So it took until like the 1800s until there was proper samples of coca leaf available in Europe. And then they were able to extract cocaine out of it. And cocaine had a couple of big influences. One of them was very positive, in that when they realized that cocaine had this numbing effect, it revolutionized surgery. Because before cocaine, all surgeries were done, there was no anesthetic. So you'd get the person drunk and give them a piece of leather to chew on, and then, okay, now we're going to cut off your leg, or we're going to cut you open and do stuff. And it was very painful and harsh to tie people down and restrain them for surgeries. And the cocaine's anesthetic effect was huge. It made a huge impact. It made surgery way more acceptable, or made it easier to do. It allowed all kinds of medical advances. And they started going, well, they would just rub it on the spot. Then they started realizing, oh, if we apply some to this nerve right here, it numbs the whole nerve and allows us to do surgeries we couldn't do before. And so they were able to learn a lot. People also started taking pure cocaine as well. And there was addiction issues and health problems. And they were like, oh, you're hooked on morphine. Well, try cocaine. That'll get you off morphine. And it didn't really work like that, right? So it started causing more problems. And then people, because it was a time of prohibition and banning things and a lot of racism involved, they decided to prohibit cocaine in North America in like the 20s, and I guess around the turn of the century, around the same time they were banning other things, and that's what became a piece of the whole war on drugs. And to me, maybe pure cocaine should be regulated a little differently than other things. But at the time, a really popular drink was called Ven Mariani, and it was a developer in Europe, Angelo Mariani, developed this coca wine. And it became very popular, and a lot of celebrities and politicians and royalty of the time were endorsing this stuff. And in America, there was a guy in Georgia who made a takeoff on Mariani wine, and he called it Pemberton's Coca Tonic or something. And when alcohol was prohibited and war on alcohol happened, cocaine was still allowed, and so they took out the alcohol and added more sugar and turned that drink into Coca-Cola. And that became a very popular drink, Coca-Cola, until the cocaine was finally removed many years later. But you know what's fascinating? Coca-Cola Company is the world's biggest grower of coca leaf. They buy coca leaf from Peru in huge quantities. They have a subsidiary company which extracts out the cocaine and sells the cocaine to pharmaceutical companies. And Coca-Cola to this day still contains coca leaf. They extract the cocaine out, and they still use coca leaf as a flavoring agent in Coca-Cola. They don't like to talk about it, but it's ingredient 7X in their secret Coca-Cola formula. Wow. And so they don't have cocaine anymore, but it's still, and it's interesting because the way Canadian law is written, the coca plant and everything you make out of it is considered a scheduled drug, right? So technically Coca-Cola is, even though there's no cocaine in it, because it uses a coca plant extract, it is illegal in Canada under the way the law is written. And if they ever come after me for selling coca tea to people, one of my legal defenses will be, if you're going to ban my coca tea, you got to ban Coca-Cola as well, because it meets the same standards under the law. It is equally prohibited. And I'd love to see the Coca-Cola lawyers in there arguing why Coca-Cola should not be banned. And so, there's a lot of fascinating stuff to be learned about the history of this plant, and it's more, it's a fascinating story, the history of each of these substances. And I've learned so much about coca leaf over the last while, and there's still so much more to learn.
Right. Well, you've been involved like from seed to plant to psilocybin to everything for so long. Like even with the psilocybin, like you also touch on that too as well. Like, do you have something going on?
I have a dispensary. Yeah. Last year, or I guess in 2019, I opened. I'm not the first person to sell mushrooms by any means, but I'm the first person to put my name on it and to provide the mushrooms in kind of a medically focused way under my own name. And so I launched the Mushroom Dispensary. It's online on mushroomdispensary.com. I can't believe no one took that website name yet. And I screen people for medical need, very similarly to how our cannabis dispensary ran for many years. And I only provide microdoses to my dispensary at this time, right? So microdosing is really beneficial. I think macrodosing, larger doses, are also really beneficial as well. But we provide microdoses. So people are taking, a tenth of a gram or, 150 milligrams or something of mushrooms twice a week or 3 times a week. And it is remarkably beneficial in terms of issues like anxiety, depression, PTSD. We are seeing incredible results. I've got a couple thousand members now that are taking these things, and in many cases they're on antidepressants and want to stop using antidepressants. And my experience with my members is that antidepressants, they work by numbing all your emotions. And so you don't feel the pain and the anxiety as much, but you also don't feel joy and happiness as much either. But that the mushroom experience is more about integrating. And so you don't stop feeling sad or anxious or whatever, but it allows you to integrate those feelings into yourself, and they don't become overwhelming anymore. And so you could also feel joy and happiness. And instead of numbing down your pain, it just allows you to feel the positive emotions as well, and to bring it all together.
Yeah, microdosing is something that many people are doing. Like even like starting low as low as 25 milligrams twice a day. So you're taking 50 milligrams a day. And I know a lot of people are actually like taking them daily for depression and anxiety and finding great results with it, just because of the fact that they feel, but they don't feel sad. They kind of like it uplifts and it gives them that little boost of whatever and endorphins that they need to maybe get that little kick of joy going for them instead of just being in dread all the time.
I find they help to remind people. Like I get people messaging me saying things like, when I microdose, I remember like how I'm connected to other people and other living things. And I'll look at a tree and I'll recognize the tree as a living being and as something that I'm connected to. And, a lot of these feelings come from feeling unconnected, where you feel depressed because we don't feel we're worthwhile and because we don't feel connected to other people. And that mushrooms can really help remind us of those connections. And you get these experiences with the bigger dosages too, and things that maybe seem trite to say, oh, we're all one and we're all connected and everybody is part of the same thing. And these things seem kind of, just like you're just saying stuff in a normal experience. But when you're on a mushroom high, those are profound truths that could rock you to your core and really change your perspective on things. And when you're microdosing, you're not overwhelmed. You still live your life and drive your car and do your business and your shopping and your cooking, but you're still kind of reminded of these things, and that you just feel a lot better about life and a lot more connected. And so I would love to, see this more available. And
right, LSD too. You can microdose LSD too for anxiety. What's your suggestion?
In a way, a lot of these things. I mean, in a way, looking at it, when you drink a cup of Coca tea, you're sort of microdosing cocaine. I mean, it's not really how I advertise it, but the idea that because of prohibition, people tend towards the most strongest and powerful versions of these substances. I mean, we look at as cannabis has become more mainstream, what's the biggest increase has it been? Has it been people stuffing down as many edibles as they can to get as high as possible? No, it's CBD becomes the most popular thing, the one that doesn't really have as much of a psychological effect, but has a lot of benefits. When you come with mushrooms, and now that we're seeing a renaissance of psychedelics and mushrooms, what's the biggest thing? People dropping as many mushrooms as they can to trip out. No, they're taking microdoses. Like people tend towards in a legal regime, let's say we're talking about with coffee. In the legal regime, people tend towards the more moderate forms, the more easy to integrate forms. With legal caffeine, people aren't all snorting pure caffeine, even though they could, but people prefer to drink a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. And so people get mushrooms, they prefer to microdose. They get cannabis, they prefer to take CBD. And so to me, this is the one of the big truths of prohibition is it makes all these drugs more dangerous and stronger and worse and pushes people towards the most dangerous forms. So I'm loving this microdose dispensary. It's really, really beneficial to so many people.
Well, I think with legalization with cannabis, it kind of blew up in their face. I think they were expecting, I don't know what they were expecting, like the sky to fall. And then it didn't. And it hasn't. And I mean, people aren't out crashing their cars and robbing banks and, smoking cannabis and, doing bad things. And
it
that never
exposed
happened.
the lie of prohibition. The lie of prohibition has always been, if we don't ban this stuff, everyone's going to do it. And people can't control themselves. These things are so bad that everyone will just run amok and go crazy. And only the thin blue line is what keeps us safe. And then the reality is that that these things are not very harmful and are often incredibly beneficial, and that prohibition just makes it all worse, and that legalization of cannabis has been really good. The flaws of it are because of the remnants of prohibition still left behind. And the good parts of legalization have been when we've totally gotten rid of prohibition entirely, and just having an entirely unregulated drug market that was free to do whatever they want wouldn't be ideal, but it'd be way better than what we have now. You know, and I tell people, when you bust people for take away their drugs, it just makes everything worse, right? Like, it increases problems, it increases everything. Let people have the drugs they want in a properly done system would be a huge improvement, and we're seeing the proof of that with cannabis, and we're going to see it with psychedelics and mushrooms. That's coming next, I think, in terms of legalization and public acceptance.
Yeah, I agree, because there's a couple court cases going on too as well, and then they did allow, what was it, 4 or 5 patients in BC to use psilocybin. I think there was a court case, just one too, right?
Yeah, mushrooms are basically where cannabis was maybe 20 years ago, right? So the first medical cases are going through where the government is giving permission to the first patients to use this substance. They're cracking the door open for others, you know, as you know, very well know, with cannabis. We had a few patients get permission to use it, and then others came through that door. And so instead of being 2 people, it was 200, and then 2,000, then 20,000. And then it became where the government couldn't deal with it anymore and had to start growing legal cannabis and providing it to patients. And eventually we got to legalization. And the same thing is happening with mushrooms, where the recognition that these things have incredible medical benefits is becoming more mainstream. Patients are getting access. And then you start to realize, well, if it's good for that sick person, maybe it's not so bad for that person who's pretty healthy as well. You know, maybe these benefits extend. Maybe they don't need it quite as much, but maybe it's also beneficial for them. You know, maybe if mushrooms are beneficial for those who are diagnosed with anxiety and depression and PTSD, maybe it's also helpful for people who maybe don't have those diagnoses, but everybody has a little bit of anxiety and some depression and some trauma in their life and some things we need healing from. Everyone's got their own private struggles, and that mushrooms and psychedelics can help those people too. And maybe it's not just a hedonistic thing that fucks up your brain and is bad for you and is about tripping out and getting high as possible. Maybe it's a beneficial plant medicine with a lot of good positive uses, and that should be reintegrated into our society. And so,
right, and there's so many of them that are just plant-based, like you mentioned, peyote too, and that was, you know, used for herbal medicines for Indigenous people for decades, for centuries. What I mean, decades, centuries.
We actually sell peyote at our Coca Leaf Cafe as well. Peyote, strangely, is totally legal in Canada, right? Peyote was never prohibited. They banned mescaline, which is the extract of the peyote plant, but when they were looking at banning mescaline in the 1990s, they decided to allow peyote because Indigenous people in Canada have used peyote for thousands of years. And it doesn't really grow here, but they would trade for it. Pre-Europeans, they would trade for peyote in central Canada. It would come up from the south, from areas like Arizona and Texas and Mexico now. And so it was widely used. And I actually, years ago, I did an access to information request to the government asking about this. And what I learned was that when they were going to ban mescaline, they talked about only allowing peyote to certain people, to members of the Native American church or other specific groups. And they decided not to do that because, in their words, if they allowed certain religious groups to use peyote, they would get the marijuana groups and the mushroom groups in there saying, we've got a religious right to use our sacred plants as well. And so they didn't want that to happen. So by just allowing peyote and not banning it, that got around that legal precedent. And they said, well, no one's really using peyote for recreational use. Peyote makes you throw up when you take it. It's quite an experience. It's not necessarily fun, but it's certainly profoundly beneficial and healing and all those things. So they decided just to allow peyote and not to ban it, so they wouldn't create this precedent for the marijuana users and the mushroom users to get their religious use allowed. And so peyote is totally legal in Canada, and we sell it at our shop. Unfortunately, it's fairly expensive, right? So you need to take around 20 or 30 grams or more of peyote to have a real breakthrough psychedelic spiritual experience. And that's going to cost you at our place around $200, right? So people ask about peyote. I tell them it's kind of similar to LSD in its effects in many ways, and mescaline and LSD are kind of similar in some ways, but So peyote is kind of like LSD, except it'll cost a lot more money and it'll make you throw up. that's my promo to sell people peyote, right? Make sure they know what they're getting into, right? But you know, but at the same, there's also a lot of money at the same time. $200 for a profound, life-changing experience. Maybe that's a good deal, you know. But it's certainly a lot less affordable than synthetic things like LSD that are coming at a much lower price. But yeah, we sell a lot of peyote plants, and it's part of our mission to make all these plant medicines available as much as we possibly can.
Right. I agree. That's so great. Like I said, and the fact that you've got a storefront that people can come in and actually purchase coca leaf tea, and you offer like baked goods and stuff there too, and like it's a little cafe,
we have
right?
Sandwiches and baked goods and cookies and things like that, and you know, trying to sell people a sandwich. A sandwich is like selling cannabis is so much easier. There's one ingredient, right? And trying to make a sandwich, you need so many ingredients, and they all go bad at different times, and it's so complicated. I don't know how regular cafes survive, right? It's very challenging. Right. But we have some great sandwiches and great baked goods, and we sell regular coffee, and you can put some espresso shots in your coca tea if you want to mix it up and have the two together. And we have a lot of other things. We'll be bringing in kava, and we'll be bringing in other stuff. We'll actually put a microdose into your drink too. If you want a CBD coffee or a microdose of mushrooms in your coffee or in your coca tea, we can do that as well. And so we're really trying to offer all these substances in safe, responsible, positive ways for people to enjoy. And so far it's going really well, considering we're open in the middle of COVID and people aren't really going to cafes and stuff these days. You know, it's been a struggle, and we opened probably over a year later than I originally anticipated. But, you know, the first step in any new project is vastly underestimating how complicated it's going to be, right? So this was no exception. But we're open and operating, and what we're doing is never been seen before in Canada, and really in most of the Northern Hemisphere. Getting a cup of coca tea is not possible. So we're doing some really innovative and unique stuff at our place.
Absolutely. Like, that's historic. Like, it really is, because I mean, and people need to be aware of the fact that it's a medicinal plant, that it needs to be addressed separately. But again, you know, here we are back to the drug war, back to the same place we started, 70 years ago or longer with these things, and the opioid crisis and everything that it's led to. It's just ridiculous that, you know, there's still laws attached to cannabis, yet they still have prohibition front and foremost on everything. So I don't know where we've done a lot of work over the last 2 decades, but there's still so much more to continue to do to take the stigma off everything. Because like you mentioned, if you decided tomorrow to ban coffee, people would be, and like I said, and if they decided to legalize heroin tomorrow, I wouldn't go out and start using heroin. You know what I mean?
I'm probably, if we had a proper world, like, I'm all for safe supply. I think it's wonderful that people should have access, but they don't offer options. So you offer people, well, you're a heroin user. Okay, well, here's some safe supply of Suboxone or something. Why not offer them a cup of opium tea as well, or some opium to smoke, or, things like that. I think that we don't go back to the more milder alternatives. I would like to see a city where you can go and smoke some opium. Maybe injectable heroin should be available. Maybe it should be a little more tightly controlled in some way, a little harder to get. I don't know, but certainly drinking opium tea and smoking opium, that does not kill anybody by overdose, and it's very manageable and can be a part of your life. And if we look back, like within the last 20 or so years, you can see prohibition in action, because the drinking opium tea, they call it Doda, and it was very popular in the Southeast Asian community in British Columbia. So in Surrey and other areas, there was a lot of people from India, and drinking Doda tea was quite common, and there was a big crackdown on it in Canada, like around the early 2000s, and they shut down people. And you make Doda tea out of opium poppy stalks, and you crush them up and add hot water, and you make a drink, and it's pain relieving and relaxing, and maybe habit forming, but certainly easier to modulate into your daily life than injecting heroin. And because they banned Doda tea, all these people started switching over to heroin use. You can see in the newspapers how, like, in the early 2000s, there's all these busts of poppy farmers and people bringing in Doda tea. And then 10 years later, stories, now this heroin is becoming a huge problem, and fentanyl is really big in our communities. And I read one where they talked to the one guy. He's like, I'm a truck driver, and I used to drink Doda tea at night to help ease the pains of sitting in my truck all day and having this very physical job. And I couldn't get that anymore. So now I started injecting heroin, and now my family's all fucked up, and I'm going to lose my job, and my health is terrible, and I'm worried I'm going to die of a heroin overdose, or that I'm going to get fentanyl in my product. And this person, maybe there's a few issues around drinking too much Dota tea, but their life was fine. They were doing fine before this. They were working their tea use into their life. They had a family, they had a job, and its prohibition of the safer form has driven them to the harder form. And what's the social benefit in that? There is none. It just causes harm.
Right. And now they're risking their life. Whereas with the Dota tea, at least, small dose, enough to get you, relaxed so you could sleep. It wasn't like you were chasing something
They were doing fine. And maybe people have issues with their Dota tea use. Like people have issues with their coffee use. I had a hard time when I drank a lot of coffee trying to quit coffee. It was extremely difficult. But I wasn't had to worry about having fentanyl in my coffee. I wasn't worried about being criminalized. I wasn't, it was a lot easier to quit and to change my use in that than it would have been if I had been forced to inject caffeine or in some kind of other situation. It would have been a lot different. And so we got to respect people's autonomy and recognize that in their natural form, all of these things are pretty manageable, and it's prohibition.
Yeah, tobacco too, right? Works. Tobacco too. Like cigarettes are the worst. Like, I've been smoking cigarettes for 30 years. I'm ashamed to say it almost, but it's very difficult. I've tried on numerous occasions to quit. I've quit cocaine, but I can't quit cigarettes. And that's terrible. Like, I just feel like, oh, why can't I throw these things in the garbage? But, it's irritable. You can't sleep. You get muscle aches. You throw up. It's not fun. So I understand, like, they say it's worse than her. I couldn't imagine being addicted to the opioid crisis that we've got going on right now. And so many people have been forced to it because of doctors, because of overregulation of, like you said, the Dota tea. Like, some of these people that are using to the point where they're overdosing and losing their lives had families, have families, had good jobs. Like, it's heartbreaking. It really is. Young people dying for no reason.
It's a massive death crisis. And, the politicians and a lot of people don't really care about drug users or believe they deserve to die. I mean, the comments you get on the internet when people talk about safe access and supply and the demonization and hatred of drug users. Well, they're just useless people and they deserve to die and they're terrible.
Yeah.
And it's really heartbreaking to see the amount of hatred. And the reality is we're all drug users, and the drugs that have been banned and the drugs that are allowed is very arbitrary. And everybody's drinking coffee or tea or sugar or cannabis or alcohol or tobacco or pharmaceutical drugs or Xanax or whatever. Everybody's, like 99.99% of the population is using a drug in some form. And the legal ones are usually easier. Prohibiting things doesn't make it any better, and usually makes it worse and ruins people's lives. And then you'll have more options and more choices. And often some of the banned drugs help you modulate use of other banned drugs, right? You having cannabis access and edibles can help people use less opiates. Having access to psychedelics can help people understand why they're using stuff in habitual ways or in unhealthy ways, and help to moderate and control their use, right? People find taking psychedelics often allows them to change their behavior patterns and to stop using other drugs in harmful ways, or to integrate them properly into their life instead of it taking over. And so, the psychedelics especially have all these abilities to help people really, change their addictive behaviors and change their patterns of behavior and gain insight about themselves. And so we treat psychedelics just the same as the other drugs, even though really they all deserve different regulation. The effects of opiates need regulation, but they're very different than stimulants, which are different than psychedelics, which are all different than cannabis. And they probably all need their own kind of rules and regulations and like guidance on how to use them safely and properly, and how to maximize the benefits and minimize the risks. I've been talking a lot about harm reduction, but I think I'm going to talk about risk reduction in the future, because a lot of this really is about reducing the risks of your drug use and about maximizing the benefits as well as minimizing the harms and risks. And we kind of forget that drug use has a lot of benefits as well as risks and harms. And we got to look at both sides of that coin and recognize that.
Absolutely. Well, I think, as adults, everything in moderation should be, up to you. And I've always kind of stood by that, basic, philosophy. As long as you're not harming yourself or anybody else, as an adult, why is it the government's business? But again, I understand their overregulation of everything is all about money too, and bottom line, right? And like you said,
a lot of it's about monopolization and controlling and being the only one able to sell these things and making it often as strong as possible, and having that be the only option available. So it's very profitable if you're in charge. Prohibition makes a lot of money, and people prohibition makes a lot of money for the criminals and for the sellers. It keeps the competition out. It keeps prices high, and it really prohibition. Drug cartels love prohibition. It's what allows them to exist and makes them stronger. So it's a coin where the police like it because it gives them an endless supply of work and endless things to do. It makes them feel like heroes. And the cartels like it because it makes them a lot of money, keeps their competition out, keeps prices high, and keeps them a steady supply of customers. And that's one of the reasons prohibition is so hard to end, is because although it's bad for society and bad for drug users, it's really good for the profiteers and the controllers who want to tell everybody what to do and who want to profit off other people's misery. Well, the drug war is really great for that. Very, very successful.
Absolutely. Well, my dear, it's been an hour, and so we're going to wrap you up and let you get on with your life, because I know you're a busy guy and you probably have stores to get opening and get on with it. So
that just flew by. That was wonderful.
It does go by really quick, doesn't it? So people can reach you at how many places?
I'm online. My website is dana@danalarsen.com. You can check out the Coca Leaf Cafe at cocaleaf.cafe.com, and we're just about to launch our mail order. So if you're interested in coca leaves or other cultural products like that, and books and things, check out our website, cocaleafcafe.com, and you can get my personal books at potheadbooks.com. But if you go to danalarsen.com, all my other stuff's all linked in there, and you can see what I'm doing and check out all my projects.
Where's the cafe located? Where's the cafe located?
We're at 651 East Hastings in the Strathcona area of Vancouver, just 2 blocks away from where we had our cannabis dispensary, where we now have the Get Your Drugs Tested Center. And you can find all our details there, cocaleafcafe.com.
Excellent. Well, thanks again very much for being on our show. And we'll catch everybody next week, same time on paceradio.net. You'll have a good week. Bye.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
At Legacy 420, we believe in being different.
Experience the difference of quality control.
Our labs provide tested formulations for all of our products.
Experience the difference in trust.
Our customers can trust that we are following up-to-date COVID precautions for their safety.
Experience the difference in accessibility.
We're open 7 days a week. Please visit our website, legacy420.com, or contact us for curbside pickup as well as nationwide mail order shipping.
Legacy 420 values overall wellness.
Come and experience the difference of Legacy 420.
BMA Hydroponics has everything you need to succeed. Visit our hydroponics superstore at 404 Maitland Drive in Belleville, and we'll show you how to grow your own quality cannabis for pennies per gram. We're open Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Thursdays and Fridays from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Call 613-967-9888. BMA Hydroponics. It's worth the drive.
The only way to go.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
A doctor's job is to relieve your pains. And when it comes to growing cannabis, the biggest pain is trimming. Let Dr. Buck Cannabis Trimming Solutions take the pain away. Whether you're a home grower or a commercial operation, we have the cure. From 4 plants to 400 plants, garden size doesn't matter. Dr. Buck Cannabis Trimming Solutions comes to you with years of experience and professional discreet service. It's simple. We trim your weed and we do a damn good job. Visit drbuckcts.com to book your trimming.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network. here at paceradio.net.